The fog in Charleston had a strange way of swallowing sound, wrapping the streets in a thick, dreamlike haze. But on that Tuesday night in late October, the silence inside Eleanor Briggs felt loud enough to split her ribs. Instead of being in her own home, she stood across the street in the dim parlor of her neighbor's house, hiding behind velvet drapes, staring through a narrow gap at the home she had lived in for 40 years. Earlier that morning, she had told her son, Rowan, and daughter-in-law, Selena, that she was taking a sleeper train to Baton Rouge to visit a sick cousin. It was a lie stitched from fear and instinct, an instinct that whispered that the people she loved were quietly erasing her from her own life. As she leaned forward, straining to see through the fog, a gentle hand touched her shoulder. She nearly cried out. It was Harold, her neighbor of 3 decades, holding 2 steaming mugs of chicory coffee. His usual warm face was weighed down with worry. "Don't look away, Eleanor," he murmured. "Midnight is when the real performance starts. You need to see the truth, or it will destroy you later." She swallowed hard and waited. At exactly 12, Harold's grandfather clock chimed, each note echoing like a countdown. Through the fog, Eleanor saw her side door crack open. A figure stepped out, Selena, but not the polished, smiling woman she knew. This version moved stealthily, hunched, purposeful. Eleanor felt her heart fracture. But she knew this moment needed context, the beginning to a story she never imagined living. Eleanor Briggs, a 66-year-old retired museum archivist and widow, had spent her life preserving history, not becoming its victim. The house she was forced to spy on, a sprawling antebellum estate perched on a hill, was the cornerstone of her marriage to the late Thomas Briggs. Together, they restored it from a decaying ruin into a sanctuary filled with love. They sanded the floors by hand, painted the walls in sage and cream, built bookshelves for first editions, and planted the sweeping magnolia trees that framed the driveway. Every creak in the floorboards told a story. Every patch of sunlight in the foyer held a memory. When Thomas died suddenly from an aneurysm 5 years earlier, the silence became unbearable. Eleanor wandered the halls like a ghost. Then Rowan stepped in with an offer she believed was love. Rowan, with his father's gentle smile and steady voice, suggested moving in with Selena. "Mom, this house is too big for you alone," he said, cupping her hands. "We can help with the maintenance. You shouldn't be lonely." Selena nodded, her expression soft enough to convince Eleanor she truly cared. "It makes financial sense, Eleanor. We can save for our own place, and you get company." It seemed like salvation. For the first year, the arrangement felt perfect. Eleanor tended her garden. Rowan and Selena worked demanding corporate jobs. The house buzzed again with laughter, footsteps, and the comforting hum of ordinary life. Sunday dinners became routine, and Eleanor felt less like a widow and more like a mother again. But 8 months ago, things began to shift, not suddenly but slowly, like rust spreading across metal. Rowan stopped fixing things, ignoring a leaky faucet until it became a metronome of irritation. The paint peeling on the porch went untouched. He spent more time hiding in the backyard carriage house, murmuring into his phone. Selena became secretive, hiding the mail, changing passwords, whispering whenever Eleanor entered a room. The warmth in the house dimmed, replaced by an undercurrent of deception. The day Eleanor found the library door locked was the day everything inside her shifted. The library, Thomas's favorite room, had never been locked. Confused, she jiggled the knob, assuming the latch had jammed. Selena appeared in the hallway, wearing a sharp smile that felt wrong. "Oh, Eleanor, we're storing some of Rowan's work inventory in there. Delicate equipment. We don't want you tripping." The explanation sounded plausible, but the look in her eyes unsettled Eleanor deeply. Soon, the nighttime whispers began. From her second-floor bedroom, she heard the soft slide of the patio doors, hushed voices, rolling suitcase wheels tapping the hardwood. As an archivist, Eleanor had spent decades detecting inconsistencies in ancient texts. She recognized the feeling of something being wrong. One morning, she confronted Rowan gently over breakfast. "Sweetheart, are you having visitors at night?" Rowan's eyes tightened with annoyance. "Mom, you're imagining things," he insisted. "This house is old, it settles. You need rest." His tone stung. He made her feel delusional, fragile. That was the day Eleanor decided to trust herself instead of the son she raised. She crafted her plan carefully, announcing a trip, packing loudly, hugging them goodbye, and leaving them relieved. That relief hurt more than anything. After leaving the train station, Eleanor circled back to Harold's house. He didn't question her tears. He simply opened his door and said, "I wondered when you'd see it." The first shock arrived at 2 p.m. A white van pulled into her driveway. A cleaning crew she'd never hired marched in, swapping her pillows for bland beige ones and hiding her family photos. "They're preparing the house," Harold whispered. "You'll see." At 4 p.m., Rowan arrived in a polo shirt with an unfamiliar logo, Briggs Getaways. Her name, her property, her legacy branded without permission. At 6, strangers arrived as if checking into a hotel, families, couples, business travelers. Selena greeted them with smiles, handing out keys Eleanor had never duplicated. She gestured at Eleanor's garden, as if it were an amenity. Eleanor watched strangers sit on Thomas's favorite chair. Her sanctuary had become a commercial property. Harold exhaled shakily. "They've been doing it for months," he confessed. 6 months. Weekends at first, then every day. They're charging $400 a night for the master suite. Eleanor did the math, nearly $36,000 a month. They were running a full illegal vacation rental business using her home, her utilities, her linens, and her trust. Eleanor felt like a volcano ready to erupt, but Harold held her arm. "That's only the greed," he warned. "You haven't seen the betrayal." And so she waited for midnight, and it came like a curse. When Selena slipped into the carriage house, a trench-coated man joined her, holding a briefcase. Eleanor lifted Harold's binoculars, her breath fogging the glass. Inside, she saw Selena signing papers. Moments later, Rowan entered, pale and sweating. He hesitated before signing, until Selena whispered something sharp in his ear. The man handed them a dark vial. Selena held it to the light, smiling, a smile so cold it felt reptilian. When the man left, Harold's voice trembled. "He's a notary, and a consultant with a reputation. He handles estate issues done in shadows, not courthouses." Eleanor dreaded her next question. "And the vial?" Harold hesitated. "I overheard them once mentioning Dr. Arlen." Dr. Arlen, an ex-doctor who lost his license for overprescribing sedatives and falsifying medical evaluations. The connection hit Eleanor like ice water. The hotel money wasn't the endgame. It was funding something far worse. Something personal. Something deadly. Selena hadn't just stolen her home. She was trying to steal Eleanor's freedom, and perhaps her life. The next morning, while Rowan and Selena left for their jobs, Eleanor crossed the street like a trespasser approaching her own execution. She walked into the backyard and retrieved the spare key Thomas had hidden in a fake rock, one Rowan had never considered. Inside the carriage house, the familiar scent of sawdust mixed with something colder. The folder lay on the workbench, recklessly abandoned. Eleanor opened it, her fingers trembling. The first page was a fraudulent deed transfer claiming she had sold the home to Rowan for $1 due to financial hardship. Beneath it was far worse, a petition for emergency guardianship declaring Eleanor mentally unfit and suffering from rapid-onset dementia. The attached medical report bore Dr. Arlen's signature, diagnosing her with hallucinations and violent outbursts. A glossy brochure for a memory care facility was paper-clipped to the back. Riverbend Rest Home, a place known for neglect. The handwritten notes beside it chilled her bones. Tuesday, meet notary. Wednesday, start dosage in tea. Thursday, call ambulance. Friday, emergency court hearing. They planned to drug her with a vial, liquid diazepam, to mimic dementia symptoms, have her committed, take guardianship, and seize her estate entirely. Eleanor's hands shook as she photographed every page. She knew now, this was no desperation. This was a conspiracy. She returned the documents, locked the carriage house, and walked back to Harold's trembling but determined. For the first time since Thomas died, Eleanor felt something fierce ignite inside her, rage. Not grief, not fear, pure fire. She called her lawyer, Vivian Hayes, a sharp-minded attorney Eleanor trusted like family. Vivian didn't gasp or hesitate. She went straight into strategy. "We need evidence," she instructed. "Don't let them feed you anything. Don't confront them. We are going to catch them in the act and take them apart legally." But Eleanor wanted more than legality. She wanted them to face her. She wanted them to feel the fear they planned to inflict. Vivian began mobilizing quickly. She arranged a private investigator to monitor the property, contacted city zoning about the illegal rental business, and alerted police for a wellness check standby. By 5 p.m. Wednesday, everything was set. Eleanor packed her suitcase, walked back into her home, and stepped directly into the trap Rowan and Selena had built. The house smelled like rosemary and garlic. Selena and Rowan were cooking dinner. When they saw her, Selena dropped her knife. Rowan paled. "Mom? You're home early." Eleanor smiled sweetly, the performance beginning. "Oh, the trip was a disaster. I just wanted to come home." Selena recovered first, tightening her smile and darting toward the kettle. "Of course, Eleanor. Let me make you some tea. You look exhausted." Eleanor took a seat, placing her purse with the printed evidence on the counter. Selena moved with deceptive grace, her hand slipping into her pocket, retrieving something small, likely the vial. Eleanor watched the performance unfold. Selena poured the tea, hesitated just slightly, then stirred in whatever she had concealed. Rowan stared at the floor, shame flickering across his features. Selena set the mug in front of Eleanor. "Sweet tea with lemon and honey, just like you love," she said, voice dripping with false warmth. "Drink up. It'll help you sleep." Eleanor lifted the mug, her hands steady though her heart pounded. She watched Selena's eager eyes, watched Rowan's trembling hands. Then she set the mug down with a deliberate, echoing thud. "Actually," Eleanor said, voice turning cold steel, "I'm not thirsty. And I'm certainly not drinking liquid diazepam." Silence exploded through the kitchen. Selena's smile collapsed. Rowan's head snapped up, eyes wide with horror. "What?" Selena shrieked. "What are you talking about?" Eleanor slid the photos across the counter, one by one, watching their faces crumble. "I know everything," Eleanor said calmly. "The rentals. The $36,000 a month. The forged deed. The guardianship petition. The medical fraud. And I know you plan to drug me tonight." Rowan made a strangled noise. "Mom, no, it's not," Selena said. She said this was the only way. "The only way for what?" Eleanor cut him off sharply. "To steal my house? To erase me?" Selena lunged for the photos. "You're confused. You're having an episode. This proves you're unstable." Eleanor stepped back. "Don't touch me." She held up her phone. "The police are already on their way. My lawyer has copies of everything. The zoning department is coming to shut down your illegal hotel." Right on cue, the front door opened. The family of 4 who had rented the master suite walked in looking bewildered. "We just received a cancellation notice," the father said, waving his phone. "Something about criminal investigations?" Selena collapsed into a stool, sobbing hysterically. Performing. Always performing. Rowan stood frozen, shaking. "Why, Rowan?" Eleanor whispered, her voice cracking under the betrayal. "Why?" Rowan's face crumpled. "We were drowning debt, bad investments. Selena said we'd lose everything. So you tried to steal me?" Eleanor hissed. "My freedom? My sanity? My life." The doorbell rang again. This time the police, with a stern city inspector. Chaos erupted. Guests were ushered out. The crew documented evidence. Eleanor handed the poisoned tea over. The vial was retrieved from the carriage house. Rowan and Selena weren't immediately arrested. White-collar cases required deeper investigations. But they were escorted off the property under an emergency restraining order. As officers guided them out, Selena screamed at Rowan, blaming him for everything. Rowan didn't fight back. He only turned to look at Eleanor with empty, devastated eyes. He resembled the little boy who used to run barefoot through the halls, but that child was gone. Eleanor didn't reach for him. She couldn't. Some fractures were irreparable. When the dust settled and the house fell silent, Eleanor stood alone in her foyer. The fog outside had lifted entirely, leaving the night clear. She walked through each room, turning off lights, touching familiar walls, reclaiming her space inch by inch. Upstairs, she stripped the guest beds and threw the sheets away, unwilling to keep anything strangers had used. Finally, she brewed herself a real cup of tea and sat in Thomas's old leather chair. Her hands shook. The adrenaline drained, leaving sorrow in its wake. She had saved herself, but lost her son. 6 months passed before the legal storm finally ended. Rowan and Selina accepted plea deals for fraud, conspiracy, falsifying medical documents, and elder endangerment. The judge spared them long sentences, but the convictions destroyed their reputations. The house was once again fully and legally Eleanor's, protected from any future claims. She renovated the carriage house, removing every trace of the nightmarish plot hatched inside it. She transformed it into a greenhouse filled with orchids, delicate, resilient flowers that thrived despite past neglect. One afternoon, a letter arrived from Rowan. 4 pages, cramped handwriting, desperate apologies. He blamed the economy. He blamed Selina. He blamed himself. He begged to see her after his release. Eleanor read the letter twice. Then she fed it to the fireplace flames. She didn't respond. People whispered that she was heartless.
"He's your son," they said.
A mother must forgive. But they hadn't sat at a kitchen counter while their child placed poison in their tea. They hadn't watched someone they loved trade their life for profit. Eleanor learned something profound standing in that midnight fog. Blood is not always thicker than water. Sometimes blood is the poison. And sometimes the greatest act of love is protecting yourself from the ones who would burn you alive for warmth. In the months that followed, Eleanor rebuilt her routines piece by piece. The house felt different now, quieter, but not in the suffocating way it once had after Thomas died. This quiet was intentional, chosen, empowering. Every morning, she walked through her garden barefoot, feeling the cool dew on the grass and whispering greetings to the magnolias she and Thomas planted decades ago. Her neighbors, once distant acquaintances, began to stop by more frequently, offering help, checking in, or simply wanting to sit on the porch and talk. Eleanor accepted the company occasionally, but she preferred solitude, real solitude, not the kind forced on her through manipulation and fear. One morning, Harold walked across the street with a packet of seeds. "They're night-blooming jasmine," he said gently. "Thought your greenhouse could use something that opens in the darkness." Eleanor's eyes softened. "Thank you, Harold. For everything." He shook his head. "You saved yourself, Eleanor. I just held the curtain." She smiled, a real, warm smile that reached her eyes for the first time in months. Healing wasn't fast, but it was steady, like roots pushing through earth. And for the first time, she felt her life grow again. Vivian, her lawyer, visited often during the aftermath. They would sit at the dining table reviewing court updates, property protections, and documents, ensuring Eleanor would never again be vulnerable to guardianship abuse. One afternoon, Vivian looked at Eleanor thoughtfully. "Have you considered creating a living trust?" she asked. "To safeguard your wishes permanently?" Eleanor shrugged. "I trusted my family once. Look where that got me." Vivian leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "A trust doesn't depend on family. It depends on your voice, your choices." Eleanor considered this. She had always believed her legacy would naturally pass on to Rowan. She never envisioned a future where she would need to protect herself from him. "I'll do it," she finally said. "But not for fear. For clarity." Vivian smiled at her answer. "That's the best way." They spent hours drafting a document that left everything to exactly who Eleanor wanted. Organizations she loved, the local historical society, her old museum, a scholarship fund for young archivists. For the first time, her legacy felt like her own again. Eleanor wasn't preparing for death. She was crafting her future with her own hands. Eleanor's strength grew quietly, like vines climbing a trellis. She redecorated the house, repainting walls in soft blues and warm whites. She replaced the pillows Selena had bought with fabric embroidered with magnolia blossoms. She hung new curtains, bought new linens, and donated 15 bags of belongings that held painful associations. Every change felt like reclaiming a stolen piece of herself. But some nights, memories returned sharply. She would sit in Thomas's chair, staring at the doorway, remembering the moment Rowan looked at her with terror, terrified not because she was hurt, but because he was caught. One night, Harold found her sitting on the porch steps, hugging her knees. "You okay?" he asked softly. Eleanor took a long breath. "Some nights it hits me how close I came to losing everything." Harold sat beside her. "But you didn't." "I know," she whispered, "but it's the betrayal that echoes." Harold placed a hand over hers. Betrayal echoes only when love was real. The words sank into her heart. She didn't respond, but she leaned gently against his shoulder. The night breeze rustled the jasmine vines. Healing was not linear, but it was happening. One evening, Eleanor attended a community meeting about elder rights held at the public library. She sat quietly in the back, listening to speakers discuss guardianship fraud, financial exploitation, and manipulation by family members. Stories poured out from strangers, stories horrifyingly similar to her own. A woman shared how her niece forged signatures to seize her house. A man described how his son convinced doctors he had dementia. Eleanor felt her heart twist. She was not alone, and suddenly, she felt compelled to rise. Her voice trembled at first, but soon steadied. She told her story, not every detail, but enough for the room to understand the shape of her pain. When she finished, silence filled the space. Then the applause came, not pitying, but empowering. After the meeting, several people approached her, thanking her for speaking, asking for advice, sharing their own fears. Eleanor realized something profound. She had been an archivist her entire life, preserving stories in boxes and folders. But now, she was preserving her own, and helping others preserve theirs. She joined the committee that night, and for the first time, the nightmare became a mission. As the seasons changed, Eleanor began hosting small gatherings at her greenhouse. Her orchids bloomed in cascades of purples and whites, and the night-blooming jasmine Harold gifted her filled the air with perfume. People from the Elder Rights Committee visited often. They shared coffee, stories, and strategies for awareness campaigns. One afternoon, a young woman named Tessa wiped tears as she told Eleanor, "My brother is trying to take my home. Hearing your story made me feel less crazy." Eleanor touched her hand gently. "You're not crazy. You're being targeted because you're strong, not weak." Tessa exhaled shakily. "How did you stay calm?" Eleanor smiled sadly. "I didn't. But I stayed aware." Word about Eleanor spread. She became known quietly in the community as someone who understood the traps that could be set around vulnerable people, someone who knew how to navigate them. She didn't seek recognition, but she embraced purpose. And every time she stepped into the greenhouse, smelling the mixture of soil and blossoms, she felt grounded again. Life was growing. So was she. One morning, Eleanor received a visit from a social worker named Amara. "I wanted to speak with you," Amara said, folding her hands professionally. "We've received permission to use your case as an anonymous study to train staff." Eleanor nodded slowly. "If it helps protect someone else, yes." Amara gave her a warm smile. "Your courage might save lives." After Amara left, Eleanor brewed herself tea and sat at the kitchen island, the same spot where Selena once tried to slide poison into her cup. She traced the wood grain thoughtfully. The house no longer felt haunted. It felt reclaimed, like a land wrestled back from invaders. She looked around and whispered, "I'm still here." The words carried power. They filled the room. In that moment, she felt Thomas's presence, not as a ghost, but as a memory of strength. She could almost imagine him sitting across from her, smiling that gentle smile he always gave her when she overcame something difficult. "I'm still here, Thomas," she whispered again. And she meant it. Deeply. As Rowan's release date approached, Eleanor felt no tremor of anticipation, no flutter of maternal instinct urging forgiveness. Instead, she felt an anchored calm. One afternoon, Harold stopped by with a newspaper. "He'll be out next month," he said softly. Eleanor nodded. "I know." He hesitated. "Do you want company when that time comes?" Eleanor looked at him, really looked at him. The man who stood by her side through every revelation. The man who brewed her coffee at midnight and held her steady when the truth almost crushed her. "Yes," she said finally. "I'd like that." Harold exhaled with relief. "You're not alone, Eleanor. Not anymore." She touched his hand gently. "I know." They sat in quiet companionship, the kind built not on romance, but on mutual survival. Rowan wrote her 3 more letters that month. She didn't open them. She placed them, unopened, in a box labeled "No Longer Mine." She wasn't cruel. She was choosing peace. The day Rowan was released, Eleanor visited the riverfront. She watched boats glide across the water, seagulls swooping low. Harold stood beside her, hands tucked in his pockets. "He might come to the house," Harold said. Eleanor shook her head. "I changed the locks again. And he can't come within 500 feet. Harold nodded. "Are you okay?" Eleanor took a deep breath, the wind lifting her gray hair. "I grieve the son I had. I don't need to grieve the man he became." Harold's eyes softened. "That's a hard truth." "It's a necessary one," she replied. She turned to him. "Sometimes letting go is the purest form of love. Love toward myself." They walked along the water until Eleanor felt the weight in her chest loosen. Rowan was free, but so was she. That evening, Eleanor lit a single candle in her living room. She sat in silence, letting the soft flame warm the room. She wasn't marking Rowan's release. She was marking her own rebirth. She closed her eyes, remembering the foggy night when she first realized her life was under attack. She remembered the terror, the violation, the cold betrayal. And yet, she also remembered the strength that rose inside her. The fire that refused to go out. "You survived," she whispered to herself. "You saved yourself." The candle flickered as if agreeing. She stood, walked into the kitchen, and washed her teacup. Simple actions became sacred rituals. Survival wasn't loud. It was quiet, steady, patient. She was all of those things now. Word of Eleanor's advocacy spread beyond Charleston. She was invited to speak at a regional conference on elder protection laws. She stood on the stage, her hands steady, her voice clear. "I was nearly erased," she told the room. "Not by strangers, but by the people I trusted most." Exploitation wears familiar faces. The audience listened with rapt attention. "But survival," she continued softly, "wears the face of courage." After her talk, a man in his 70s approached her. "Thank you," he said. "My daughter's trying to take my home. You just gave me the strength to fight." Eleanor smiled warmly. "Then keep fighting. Your life is worth the effort." As she left the conference hall, she felt a purpose settle into her bones. She had taken her power back, and now she lent it to others. Eleanor's life slowly settled into a rhythm that felt peaceful and intentional. She woke early, tended her orchids, baked lavender scones on weekends, and joined Harold for afternoon walks. They were close now, closer than neighbors, but not bound by labels. One evening, during a warm sunset, Harold gently said, "You know, Eleanor, I care about you." She met his gaze, unafraid. "I care about you too, Harold." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. Some companionship was deep enough to exist in silence. The kind that grows from surviving storms together. The kind that doesn't demand but offers. As spring returned, Eleanor threw open every window in her house. Warm breezes rode through the halls, carrying the scent of magnolia blossoms. She walked room to room, touching walls she once feared she would never see again. She cooked her favorite meals. She played old jazz records. She even danced alone in the living room, laughing softly at the freedom in her movement. Later that afternoon, she wrote a letter, not to Rowan, but to herself. "You protected your life," she wrote. "You chose peace over guilt. You chose truth over blood. And you are stronger than the storm that tried to drown you. She placed the letter on her nightstand. A reminder. A seed of memory she would never lose. On the 1-year anniversary of the night she uncovered the truth, Eleanor stood on her porch at dusk, staring across the street where she once hid behind curtains, trembling with fear. She exhaled slowly, releasing the last fragments of that night. I saved the woman in the mirror, she whispered. And she is enough. The sky turned golden, then lavender. Harold stepped onto his own porch and waved. She waved back, her heart lighter than it had been in years. At 66, she was alone, but not lonely. Her house was hers. Her freedom was hers. Her story was hers. And she had learned something crystal clear. Family is not defined by blood, but by safety. She walked inside, closed the door gently, and felt peace settle around her like a soft shawl. For the first time in a long time, Eleanor Briggs felt complete.